Hello, welcome to PBIS, a prophylactic for behavior. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. My name is Linda Mead. I am a state support team consultant at Hopewell in Newmarket. Prior to doing that, I was an elementary principal at East End Elementary for 12 years, and before that, I taught 5th grade for 10 years in a little school that they closed down in Martinsville, Ohio. If you're not familiar with me, some things you need to know are, I tend to have a twisted sense of humor at times, and I like to bring that into my work. I'm warning you of that now, so if as we move through things it gets to be a little too much, I can tell you, you were warned. A disclaimer before we move forward with this presentation. This session was not created by the PBIS network. It was not created by anyone associated with the PBIS network, nor by anyone working at ODE. This was entirely created by me, Linda Mead. I tell you this in case you are offended or annoyed by the session's content. You know who to blame. This session is the end result of a long commute and concern about a few educators who don't see the value in positive behavioral interventions and support, PBIS, or understand its purpose. I tend to find analogies work for me as a way to understand and explain pieces of my work and life, so I began thinking about analogies to explain PBIS to those for whom none of the established trainings and work groups have worked. The idea of PBIS as a prophylactic for behavior was born somewhere on Route 73 between Wilmington and Hillsborough. Over many drives and several months, this presentation took shape in my head, but it's taken me 3 years to share it widely with others. You are the first group to have this shared with them as a presentation. My apologies if after a few slides you decide I should have kept it to myself and decide to exit and choose another session. I hope you enjoy this analogy, find some humor in my presentation, and find some tidbits you can take back to your colleagues. Thank you. So, I said this was a prophylactic for behavior. What is a prophylactic? If you look in the dictionary, it is defined as something guarding or preventing the spread of a disease or tending to ward off. This is the definition we'll use. A prophylactic is a preventative. And because we all love definitions that have words you have to define, a preventative is something that is designed to prevent the occurrence of a disease, or in our case, a behavior. Not to give prizes and recognize those who stay healthy or behave. Not to punish those who get sick or misbehave. The ultimate goal is to prevent something. So what does it really mean to prevent something? So what does it mean to prevent something? I'm going to go through these and I want you to think which one resonates with you. Prevent is to be in readiness for, or to meet or satisfy in advance, to act ahead of, to go or arrive before. Prevent also means to deprive of power or hope of acting or succeeding, to keep from happening or existing. I really like definition 2, to deprive of power or hope of acting. So often when I was teaching, it felt like misbehavior turned into a power struggle. And if I prevent it, I'm depriving that power from that hope of acting or succeeding. I'm eliminating that power struggle. I once sent a child home for throwing a piece of paper on the floor. Seriously, who won that one? Tyler won it if you're keeping track. And this leads me to the session subtitle, what I have always privately called it in my mind. PBIS as birth control for behavior. If anyone is offended, I'm sorry, you're free to leave at this time. I know birth control is private and sometimes religious matter for folks. So if you're getting scared, feel free to leave at any time. No judgment. I decided to do it this way because this analogy made sense to me. And I think it may help some of your staff members make sense of PBIS also. Most school personnel understand the concept behind PBIS. Acknowledging the behaviors we wish to see increases those behaviors and encourages more of them. Logical consequences for not following the expectations helps to reinforce when we make a mistake, we face the consequences, fix it, and move on. But we all know that teacher or some other school person who just doesn't get it. They have been teaching this way for 30 years or 3 years, and these kids just need to behave because they told them to. Because I'm sure that teacher does whatever the principal tells them to, just because they were told to. If you know that person, this one's for you. So how is PBIS like birth control? Anything used in a prophylactic way is designed and structured to keep something unwanted from happening. In the case of birth control, it's to prevent pregnancy. In the case of PBIS, it is to prevent behavior that makes it difficult or impossible to get along well in society, school, or the classroom. The ultimate goal is to create an environment where appropriate behavior is the norm. PBIS does this by setting structures in place to prevent the inappropriate behavior before it starts. It's not about rewarding good behavior, although that may be used to encourage and support the expected behavior, because the goal is to encourage good behavior and discourage bad behavior. Just like birth control is designed to prevent pregnancy before it begins, in order for birth control to be effective, you have to have a structure and supplies in place. What's another way these two things are similar? With birth control, the person who most wants to ensure pregnancy doesn't occur needs to be the person responsible for ensuring it is used. It is best if all parties involved help decide what method to use, but sometimes one participant needs to be educated on the options first. Some birth control is readily available by everyone. Other types need to be prescribed by a professional, and for a few people, a specialist needs to determine what will prevent pregnancy and also protect the patient's health. In PBIS, the education professional needs to determine what supports are needed for everyone to prevent inappropriate behavior. For most of your students, that is a standard set of expectations and encouragement. A few students need something else, a prescription, because of the circumstances. A very few need something more intensive, a specialist. It is up to the education professional to decide who needs what and make sure they get it. Another similarity, for both, there are methods that cost a lot of time and resources to implement, and some that are basic and free. How much are those involved willing to do or not do to achieve the desired result? Some examples. More expensive may not mean better. A condom is a condom no matter what color it is. For some kids, a sticker and extra recess are just as effective a reward as a trip to the zoo. A disapproving look and practicing for 3 minutes at recess, more effective than losing an entire recess at discouraging behavior. Fast, cheap, and easy is always best, at least for PBIS. All of the people involved need to see it is important. Most people working to prevent pregnancy realize how important prophylactic measures are and will remind themselves and/or their partners to use them. As a result, most partners see these measures as important too. If your partner said, "I don't really see the need for birth control. I've engaged in this behavior since I was 17 and I don't have any kids yet," would you trust that you don't need to use birth control? Everyone who is implementing PBIS also needs to realize and support that PBIS is important and create an environment where appropriate behavior is the norm. If the adults express its importance, talk about it, support it, the kids will see it that way also. If the adult treats it casually and aren't consistent and don't reinforce expectations, the students will also adopt this behavior. It is up to the adults to make PBIS work. You need to have a plan. Spur of the moment doesn't work long term. Deciding you need birth control on your way to the bedroom won't work. You need to plan ahead. Those responsible need to have supplies ready and possibly already in use to prevent pregnancy. You can't just wing it and hope for the best. With PBIS, you also need a plan. Everyone needs to know what is expected, what happens when you follow the expectations, and what happens when you don't. Supplies, lessons, materials, incentives need to be ready day one and every day after that. Spur of the moment doesn't work. PBIS and birth control must both be implemented consistently with fidelity. Sporadic implementation may, and most likely will, lead to unwanted consequences. You can't implement birth control measures sometimes when it's convenient and easy. You can't plan to stop the action to run to the drugstore and be surprised when someone gets pregnant. PBIS needs to be implemented with fidelity every day in all areas of the school for everyone based on their need. The surest way to increase behavior is with intermittent reinforcement. So if you only reward me for walking quietly occasionally, I'll do it more consistently because I don't know when the reward is coming. Likewise, if you only correct me for yelling in the bathroom sometimes, I'll do it more often because I don't know when you'll notice. What works for one person may not work for all people. Options are important. We don't all use the same birth control. There are basics for everyone, but the over-the-counter method may not work for some of us, or we may not be comfortable with it, so we need to visit the clinic. For a few people with other health issues, a medical professional is needed to help them determine what is the best birth control for them. Some people prefer a permanent option, while others think that is a bit drastic. The same is true for PBIS. There is a basic matrix and reinforcement system that works for most students, but it doesn't work for everyone. Some feel that if what works for most doesn't work for Cody, then Cody better shape up, fly right, and get into detention until it does. But few would say, if oral birth control doesn't work for Mary because it reacts with her other meds, she better figure out how to get used to it because it works for everyone else and she just better deal with the consequences. As education professionals, we're usually more accepting of having Jimmy sit near the front of the class due to vision issues, get juice instead of milk because of a milk allergy, or even listen to books online rather than read them because of a disability. Then provide someone with additional behavior supports due to a need in this area. But these supports need to be within the PBIS plan and structure. A typical person needs 5 positive interactions for each negative interaction. A person, especially a child, who has difficulty controlling their behavior may need 10 to 20 positives for each negative. If you have an overall positive, caring classroom environment, students will take correction more easily than in a combative atmosphere. This is my favorite analogy for PBIS and birth control. If it fails once, you don't throw out the idea that it will ever work. You double down. If our birth control didn't work, what would we do when we go back the next time? Say, that didn't work, so I'm not going to use birth control anymore. I never heard someone say this. When birth control doesn't work, most folks double down and use additional measures to prevent baby number 1 from having a sibling 9 months younger. With PBIS, some of us tend to try it for a couple of weeks, and if it doesn't work as well as we'd like, we decide it isn't good, necessary, useful, and we stop using it when what we need to do is double down. Make sure we are implementing it with fidelity. Look at data to find out why it isn't working, then double our reinforcement and do some booster sessions to get back on track. Punishment won't correct behavior. Many teachers say students learn through their consequences. Has anyone ever gotten 2 speeding tickets? I have. If we learn from consequences, there would be no teen parents with more than 1 child. Some teachers say you have to punish students because that will discourage the others. If that was true for our birth control analogy, you'd never have 2 pregnant students in your high school in the same year, and venereal disease would be very rare. If the experience of others changed our behavior, once one couple had an unplanned pregnancy or medical issue due to not using birth control, everyone else would immediately begin using birth control or not engaging in pregnancy-causing behavior because Mary and Cody are going to be parents. The same is true for PBIS. Punishment without instruction on how not to let it happen again will not correct behavior. In fact, it may get worse, because if you've already lost the pizza party, why worry about it? Seeing others punished will not correct student behavior if I am a child who has a problem controlling my behavior. It may, however, scare some rule followers into terrified silence. You need to have a plan for what you will do if it doesn't work. If our birth control method doesn't work, some of us have an idea of what we would do next. Some of us don't. If we are engaging in behavior that may produce a child, we should have at least a vague idea of what the plan is if that child is on his or her way. Being mad won't stop it. Ignoring it won't stop it. Blaming the other party involved won't stop it. Expect the best, plan for the worst. Expect the best but plan for the worst is a good idea for PBIS also. Nothing works 100% of the time for 100% of the population. So what do we do when it doesn't? For most students, this is built into the general PBIS plan. We remind them of the correct behavior, talk about it, and move on. But what is the plan if that doesn't work for Cody? Do we instantly revert back to the old way? He better shape up, fly right, and get detention until he can. Or do we have a plan that everyone, including Cody, knows? This is where you go to calm down. We'll talk about it when you are calm. Anyone who has ever had someone explain what they did wrong when they are mad about what happened knows this is not the time for conversation. When I have dropped the hot cookie sheet I accidentally grabbed without a pot holder, having someone calmly say, "What should you have done? Did you use a pot holder?" would probably get them smacked with a hot cookie sheet. Understanding, cold water, and help cleaning up the mess would be much more appreciated. We can go pot holder shopping later. There are intrinsic and extrinsic rewards when it is successful. There are rewards for using birth control. Mainly, you can continue to live as you have previously. You'll have more disposable income and freedom, maybe a nice vacation if you save enough. For PBIS, there are also extrinsic rewards. Most schools have a reward system tied to the matrix as part of their PBIS program. Some use Tiger Paws or Rocket Bucks. Others have an incentive for those who didn't have an office referral. These are designed to support students as they learn and use the matrix of expected behaviors until the rewards become intrinsic. When the school is calmer, everyone is learning, and individual students see that they are doing well and are proud of themselves for following expectations, rewards have become intrinsic. Extrinsic rewards can be reduced for most students as they build an intrinsic system to control their behavior. Move on to intermittent rewards and verbal reinforcement. When properly implemented, everyone has a great experience. Everyone can find a method of birth control that works for them, from abstinence to sterilization and many in between. PBIS will also work for everyone, from Caught You Being Good tickets to intensive check-in, check-out behavior plans with outside support. When birth control and PBIS are implemented consistently, everyone will have a great experience, both in their current activity, school, and in the future. Education allows for choices in life, and we want our students to have as many choices as possible as adults. Now you're going to have to listen to my soapbox moment on this topic. Many of us have complained at one time or another about the parents of our students. I've heard it said, probably said it myself, that many parents don't value school, won't come to conferences, don't support the school, and can't help their kids with schoolwork. For many parents, this is because they did not have a good, successful school experience. I would like to tell you PBIS is part of the solution for this. Kids who don't have choices in life tend to stay in the area or community where they grew up, even if there are not options available there. And if they stay in the community and marry in the community, eventually they will be the parents of students in your school. In 7 years or fewer, you will have the children of your current high school students in your kindergarten class. And the cycle of disenfranchised, marginalized, labeled students will begin again. By embracing PBIS, you can help all students have a more positive, successful school experience. If students have a more positive experience, they are more likely to graduate and thus have more choices in life. And for the majority who stay in your community, they will be more positive about school because they liked school. They will be more involved as parents, and their children will have an even better experience. You have the solution to so many school issues in your schools right now. If our current kids have a good experience, you will reap the rewards for generations to come. To review the main points of this session, PBIS is like birth control for behavior. Both strive to prevent something you don't want to have happen. The person with the most experience and knowledge needs to accept that they have a lot of control over how well it works. There are methods that cost a lot of time and resources to implement, and some that are basic and free. How much are those involved willing to do or not do to achieve the desired result? The people involved need to see it as important. You need to have a plan. Spur of the moment doesn't work long term. It must be implemented consistently with fidelity. Sporadic implementation may and most likely will lead to unwanted consequences. What works for one person may not work for all people. Options are important. If it fails once, you don't throw out the idea that it will ever work. You double down. Punishment won't correct behavior. You need to have a plan for what you will do if it doesn't work. There are intrinsic and extrinsic rewards when it is successful. When properly implemented, everyone has a great experience. Thank you very much for sticking with this until almost the end. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were not insulted. And I hope that you found some tidbits that you can use to help that person who thinks that they should do it just because you told them to. As your culminating activity, I'd like you to please use the form in your folder to share your thoughts on this presentation and how you're considering using it in the future. As we tell students all the time, there's no right answer. I want to know what you really think. Loved it, hated it, would never use it with others, or can't wait to use it in the fall. I can take it. Please complete the session evaluation in your Schoology folder. Completion of the evaluation is required for you to receive your certificate of completion. Certificates will be emailed to participants in early July. Thank you for taking part in this session. Enjoy the rest of your virtual conference experience.